Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. Episode 34, Little Miss Outlaw. I came across Jessie Hickman when researching Harry Power the Bushranger. Whilst she's officially not under the definition of an Australian bushranger, Jessie Hickman certainly was an outlaw and one of the very few women in the early colony who was able to survive in the bush and evade police. Jessie Hickman was born Elizabeth Jessie Hunt on the 6th of September 1890 in Carcoar, New South Wales. Her parents were James Hunt, also known as Charles Theodore Beecher, and Susan Ann McIntyre, who had married in 1888. James Hunt was born Charles Beecher in Middlesex, England, and he changed his name mid-immigration to Australia via New Zealand to James Hunt. Charles Beecher is recorded as having deserted the Navy whilst in Australia in 1884 and would have been doing everything he could to avoid being returned to the Navy. So it is likely that this is the cause of his re-entry to Australia via New Zealand under a different name. Charles is documented in a number of naval-based records and later in Australia under the name James in local newspapers and births, deaths and marriages. Charles is thought to have changed his date of birth by 2 years in order to join the Navy at just 13 years old, when 15 was the common joining age. Jessie Hickman also had an older brother, Duncan Hector Kenneth Hunt, who was born in May 1889 at Carcoar. Her brother Duncan was featured in an article, so that was in November 1909. It's called Dishonest Railway Employee, Larceny of Trousers and Money, fine of £5 imposed. Duncan Hector Kenneth Hunt, 20 years old, a relieving railway porter, appeared before the Bathurst Police Court yesterday on a charge of having, at Bathurst, between October the 27th and November the 19th, stolen 2 pairs of trousers at the sum of £1.16 of the total value of £3 5s and 6pence, the property of the Chief Railway Commissioner for Railways. Senior Constable Shee said that he saw the accused at the Bathurst railway station on Saturday last. He showed them the parcel produced, addressed to W.F. Hodge, Wattle Flat. The accused said that he saw the parcel in the parcels office on Wednesday last, and at first he denied taking a pair of trousers from it, but afterwards admitted having done so. He was wearing the trousers at the time. He also admitted, after further denials, that he took a pair of uniform trousers from the office on October 27. The witness showed the accused an impression of the drawer in the parcels office, apparently caused by a chisel or some such instrument, but the accused said that he had not attempted to force the drawer open. He also denied taking any money from the drawer, but on the way to the police station he said, "I've been taking money from the drawer for some time, but I cannot say how much, as I took a few shillings now and then. However, if you say £1.16 has been taken, I'm agreeable to pay the amount." He added that the drawer was unlocked when he took the money. Peter Moore, station master at Bathurst, said that the accused had been at the Bathurst station for about 2 months. Witnesses' attention was drawn to the fact that the parcel produced had been broken open, and prior to that a pair of uniform trousers was missing from the office. The accused had charge of the parcels office from 1 till 2 each day. Harold Elphick, the parcels clerk, said that during the past month there had been shortages of cash in the amount of £1.16. As he was responsible for the cash, he had been obliged to make good these deficiencies out of his own pocket. In answer to accused, the witness said that he left the drawer open for him between 1 and 2 p.m. The accused, who was undefended, pleaded for leniency. He said that this was the first time he'd been in trouble. "I must say," he added, "that it is a very big temptation for any young fellow." He was fined £5 with the alternative of 2 months' imprisonment, which was imposed, and the fine was paid. And it does seem that Duncan Hunt did go on the straight and narrow after this incident. He became a miner and he married Florence, known as Florrie Carney, in 1913, a brewer winner in New South Wales. They had 8 children. Duncan lived in the Candos-Rylstone area of New South Wales in 1928, and Jessie moved there after the breakup of her marriage. Duncan died in November 1959, aged 70, and he is buried at Rylstone in New South Wales. So getting back to Jessie, when she was just 8, Jessie's parents separated and she joined Veldar's circus. Some reports say that her parents gave her away to the travelling bush circus. I'm not sure why, and I'm not sure whether they left both children, but we do know that her parents divorced in 1902. Her brother would have been 13 and she would have been 12 at the time of this divorce. After the Valdez returned to France, she joined Martini and Shaw's circus. Martini and his de facto New Zealand-born Julia, also known as Jewel or Jessie Devine as stage names, cared for Jessie after they took her in with them when they left the Sculthorpe show. It does say that Jessie was 11 at the time that they took her under their wing, so a couple of years before the divorce was finalised. Jessie was a horse worker in the Martini's buck jumping show. She thrived, and at the age of 15, under the name Miss Kemp, she won the Australian Ladies Rough Riding Championship in 1906. Jessie was injured in a fall from a bucking horse in her time with the show, though. While the circus was performing at Beltree Station, north of Scone in New South Wales, she met Benjamin Hickman. On the 6th of March 1913, Jessie gave birth to a son, Hedley Rupert Hickman. She gave him to a friend to raise. His birth certificate states his name as Hedley Pryor, son of Paul and Christine Margaret Pryor, born at Waverley, New South Wales. He was known as Hedley Rupert Hickman Belatti Pryor and grew up not knowing who his biological parents were. Hedley's father was Benjamin Walter Hickman. He was born in Oxford, England on the 19th of September 1890. He was a Navy seaman and he enlisted in Australia in June 1915 and stated that he was married. However, on his enlistment record, it states that he wasn't married initially and then it was changed later. He fought in France and Egypt and was shot in the chest on 2 different occasions. He returned to Australia on the 5th of July 1919 and lived at Kogarah in New South Wales. He became engaged to a French woman, Olympie Marchand, and promised to return to her in July 1919 once he was discharged. In March 1920, Ben was named in a divorce in New South Wales as the third party, and then in August 1920 he obtained 2,100 acres of land at Darlinghurst. In November 1920, he applied to lease land at Lismore, New South Wales, but it did not appear that the transaction was completed. So he didn't return to the French woman, so he never went back to France, despite her panicked pleas with the letters, and the letters are recorded under Ben Hickman's military papers. So in 1920, he reunited with and married Jessie in Richmond, New South Wales on the 11th of December 1920. In 1922, Ben was living at Darlinghurst and applied for land at Port Macquarie. Ben and Jessie divorced in October 1928. Accounts state that it was a stormy marriage, and at the time of their divorce, they're listed as living at Rylstone, New South Wales, and then formerly at Hoxton Park in Liverpool. And the details of the divorce are in a small article, and it says, "My wife told me that she would sooner live under a sheet of bark in the country than live in the city," said Benjamin Walter Hickman in the divorce court on Saturday. Hickman and his wife, Elizabeth Jessie Hickman, had left him in spite of his frequent appeals to her to return, and she was still living apart from him. He said she was very fond of animals, horses and cows, and wanted to live on the land. I had to get work in the city. The parties were married at Richmond in December 1920. Mr. Justice James found that the wife had deserted her husband without just cause and granted the husband a decree nisi for dissolution. Ben was listed as a cleaner at Campsie in 1930, a caretaker in 1934 at Darling Harbour, And Ben lived until he was 88 years old and died at the Entrance, New South Wales in 1971. What became of Ben and Jessie's son Hedley? Well, he married Gladys Myrtle Simpson on the 8th of November 1933, and they had Diane Beverley on the 20th of March 1935 and Pamela Ruth in Matraville on 17th of November 1942. He enlisted in World War II on the 7th of July 1942 and stated his occupation as a foreman at an oil refinery at Recon Process Lubricants, an oil processing plant at Forest Lodge in Sydney, and living at Matraville. He initially was a coppersmith and then he moved into the RAAF in February 1945 and was permanently medically discharged in July 1945. He was a foreman plumber and secretary of his local RSL at Mascot in New South Wales in 1949. He lived in Bondi North in 1972 and he died in 1996 in Sydney, aged 83. So after the birth of her son, Jessie lived in Sydney under the name of Jessie McIntyre. And while Ben was away at war, Jessie was starting to delve into some unlawful actions. She served 2 jail terms in Long Bay Jail. One jail term was in 1913 and 1914, and the other one was 1915 to 1916. And some articles of that time were featured. The first one is titled Accomplished Equestrian. Sydney. Jessie McIntyre, 22, an accomplished equestrian, lately of a buck jumping show, was committed for trial at Parramatta on the charge of stealing 2 horses, a number of fowls and ducks and rugs. And in July 1913, it outlines the details in the Parramatta Police Court. It's titled The Stolen Horses, the Brunette and the Fowls. At the Parramatta Police Court on Wednesday, before Mr Maitland, a brunette young lady, Jessie McIntyre, whose age was given as 22, was charged with stealing a pony valued at £16, the property of George Carter. Jessie McIntyre, the same young woman, was then charged formally with several other cases. The first case, at Guildford, on or about the 19th of June, stealing a horse valued at £50 belonging to W.H. Appleyard. The second offence, stealing on or about June 19th at Old Guildford a horse rug valued at 10 shillings, the property of W.H. Appleyard. The third offence, stealing on or about June the 17th at Guildford a rug valued at 11 shillings, the property of George Friend. Stealing at Guildford on or about June 17 a rug valued at 10 shillings and 6 pence, the property of William Canning. Stealing 3 pairs of fowls at Granville on June 22nd, the property of Florence Blower. Stealing on or about the 5th of July at Fairfield 3.5 pairs of fowls and ducks, the property of Lily Quarterman, valued at £3. Stealing on or about June 19th at Granville traces, winkers and reins, valued at 10 shillings, the property of Joseph Blower. It transpired that the horses mentioned in 2 of the above charges had been in possession of Senior Constable Wilkinson at Bankstown, but during the evening of Tuesday, someone had taken them out of the police paddock and they had not seen them since. The police had been out searching, but the animals had not been recovered. The girl was remanded until Monday next on a bail of £80. On the 16th of August, the Parramatta Court of Sessions outlines her trial. Wild and lonely life, a girl on her trial. At Parramatta Court of Sessions on Friday before Judge Scholes. Jessie McIntyre then pleaded not guilty to several other charges: stealing a horse and a rug from W. Canning, stealing a rug from George Friend, stealing 6 fowls from Florence Blower, stealing fowls and 4 ducks from Lily Quartermain. And after pleading not guilty to the last charge, the girl sat down in the dock with a smile on her face. Later on, she was called up for sentence. Mr. F.W. Todd Hunter appeared for the girl, stating she was 22 years of age. She was really married, but for reasons of her own, she did not want to disclose the identification of her husband. She had lost her parents when a child, and after that had been living with relatives. She followed a roving life and for some time was a rider at Martini's Circus. She lived a lonely life at Bankstown and had evidently fallen the victim of temptations, and he asked for clemency. His Honour said that the girl's position seemed to be the result of the environment she had been living in and living a wild life. He thought it would be kinder to send her to an institution where she could avail herself of reformatory influences and discipline than send her back to the wild and lonely, dangerous life she'd been living. He would send her to an institution with the object of enabling her to build herself up and fit herself for the troubles and trials of life which might be ahead of her. She was young, and though life was short, she possibly had a sufficiently long life ahead of her to be utilised to good effect. The sole object of the sentence would be the girl's own improvement. He hoped it would have the desired effect. He sentenced her to 12 months' imprisonment with light labour in the reformatory at Long Bay. I obtained a jail record for Jessie. The jail record doesn't talk about a reformatory school. However, it does indicate jail time. It also indicates an alias of Bell. So it's quite likely that at the time that she was sentenced to the reformatory school, they were unaware of the alias and the misdemeanours that were uncovered with that alias. So she was tried at the Parramatta Quarter Sessions on the 15th of August 1913, and this was for home stealing, and she received 12 months jail time for that offence. And there is an entry in the Police Gazette saying Jessie McIntyre or Bell, horse stealing from Edward Farrell, horse stealing and larceny from Albert Berriman, and stealing from Albert Berriman. She would have been released in the August of 1914, and we find a newspaper article in November 1914. At the local court on Monday, Philip James and Jessie McIntyre were charged in company with stealing a buggy cushion and lamp, the property of Thomas Devitt, and the follow-up of that says that Philip James and Jessie McIntyre, alias Bell, have been further charged in company with breaking and entering the dwelling house of George Everett, Liverpool, and stealing carpenter's tools valued at £4, also stealing a canvas horse rug, the property of Andrew Hoare, clothing the value of £3, the property of James William Orth, stealing a buggy harness, the property of William Hancock, and a gelding, the property of Norman Steed, committed for trial on charges of Parramatta Sessions. So it's clear that she really didn't learn anything, because within 2 months of being released, she's back to her old tricks. So, 3rd of February 1915 in court. Jessie McIntyre in court, a string of cases. Philip James and Jessie McIntyre were charged with stealing at Bankstown on the 14th of November a gelding, the property of N Strand. A second count was receiving. The male prisoner pleaded guilty and Jessie McIntyre pleaded not guilty. Constable Edgar Coleman, stationed at the Oaks, deposed that on November the 16th, he went with Constable Cook to a property known as Robbins, about 7 miles beyond Oakdale. Mr. Robbins occupied the property. It was a bark hut on 80 acres, a selection. James and Jessie McIntyre had been living there. Robbins was a schoolmaster at Kangaloo. He owned the place. He found there was a chestnut gelding. He examined the animal and found that a fresh brand had been added onto the old brand. The old brand had been an L, and it had been altered into an oblong. An L the wrong way up was added over the oblong. Constable Cook and witness made a search in a dead fire and found a piece of wire, a rough brand, such as it would make an L. They took the animal to Picton on the 16th, and on the 22nd the witness showed the gelding to James. They later showed the gelding to McIntyre, who said, "This horse was found on Robbins' place, which you were occupying. Do you know anything about it?" And she said, "No, nothing." They showed her the branding wire. She said, "I know nothing about it." They said, "Do you think this brand would make a brand like that on the horse?" She said, "Yes, it looks like it." Cook said, "Did you drive a horse of this description at any time on your way from Canley Vale?" She said no. She stated that when she came out to Robbins on Thursday the 12th, she was driving the bay mare. McIntyre said that she did not think that anyone could have gone to the selection whilst she and James were there without them knowing about it. And he said, "Both of you drove the same mare in different traps at the same time." The two, James and McIntyre, made no reply. Norman Steed Farrier, residing at Waterloo, deposed that the gelding outside the courthouse was his property, turned him out at George's Hall up at Bankstown on the 8th of November, went a fortnight later to look for the gelding, and it was not in the paddock. He saw the gelding with an altered brand in the possession of the police. There was a bar over the L in the original brand where the gelding turned out. There was a sort of square and an L on the top on the brand. Now it had been altered. The accused, Jessie McIntyre, went into the box. She deposed that on one occasion, James told her that he had a horse turned out with Mr. Clark. Some time ago he owned a chestnut. In the morning, she could not remember the date. The horse outside the court now was being led, attached to a cart. The horse broke away and James caught the chestnut. He drove off. She did not see James again until 6 p.m. It was pouring rain. He was driving a bay mare and leading a bally pony. He was driving out following her furniture when James was taking from Lansdowne Street to Canley Vale to another place. She did not see the chestnut horse from the time she saw it at a distance until she saw it at Picton. She had owned 2 or 3 chestnut horses. Lee and Stanford must be wrong. She saw a few people on the road. She could not recollect having seen Lee and Clark. The horse she was driving was a reddish bay. She could almost call it a chestnut. She had been convicted of horse stealing only months ago and received a sentence of 12 months. She served her sentence and went out on good behaviour. She came out on the 15th of May. She did not receive a notice in the jail. No notice had been served on her. A constable read one to her. The Crown prosecutor asked the witness several times where she got the animals, which she had on that day, and the witness said, "I have got the receipts." And Miss Mason said, "Where did you get them from?" And the witness said, "If you want to know where I bought them, you must find out." His Honour rebuked the witness. The Crown prosecutor was only doing his duty and she must not be rude to him. Mr. Mason asked her where she got the cow. The witness said that she reared the cow from a calf. His Honour asked, "Where were you living?" And the witness said, "Is Mr. Wilkinson in court?" His Honour asked again, "Where were you?" And the witness said, "On King's Farm," and then moved to George's Hall estate. The judge pointed out to the young woman that she was at liberty to address the jury. He said to the jury, "You must use your common sense about it. I don't want to be too hard on the young woman, but if you believe she was driving a chestnut horse and she denies it, you are left at large in this way, that you can find the verdict if you think she was dishonestly in possession of the horse. You can find her guilty on either count. You must be satisfied. Your common sense must lead you to a conclusion without any reasonable doubt." And another article mentions that Philip James and Jessie McIntyre were charged with stealing at Granville a cart, the property of Deborah O'Neill, a second count of receiving. James pleaded guilty to stealing. Jessie McIntyre pleaded not guilty. Constable Coleman deposed that he saw the accused at Robin's place. The cart mentioned the case was standing in front of the bark hut. In the cart was some articles of female clothing belonging to Jessie McIntyre. He asked her who owns the cart, and she said, "I know nothing about it." James said that was the cart that he drove through the Oaks. He added that he took it over from Jessie McIntyre on Liverpool Road on Monday. He said to McIntyre, "Do you hear that?" She said, "I know nothing." The prosecutor called Philip James. James said he was a labourer. He did live in Liverpool Road, Upper Bankstown. It was prearranged between the witness and Jessie McIntyre to take the cart. And the Honour said, "To take it, what do you mean?" And the witness said, "To steal it." James said the cart was on a green in front of a house. The witness rode one horse, Jessie the other. Jessie helped him to put a horse on the cart and they took it away. Jessie McIntyre went into the box again. She said when she came from Sydney, she saw James drive out of her place with the cart. She did not know that the cart was at Robin's until the constables took her there to see the cart. The young woman made a short statement to the jury. At 4:50 p.m, the jury in the Jessie McIntyre case returned to court with a verdict of guilty of receiving with a recommendation to mercy. And His Honour asked on what grounds, because she's a woman, and the foreman answered, "We discussed various things, Your Honour. She probably was led into it." His Honour stated, "Yes, probably, on what you know." At 5:10 p.m, the jury in the second McIntyre case brought in a verdict of guilty on both counts. And His Honour said, "You had better say one or the other. I don't see how a person can be guilty of both receiving and stealing." There were 4 or 5 other cases against the accused, and the Crown prosecutor said he would take pleas on this on Tuesday. And as a result, Philip James was sentenced to 15 months imprisonment. Jessie McIntyre sentenced to 1 year and 9 months imprisonment. Jessie was released on parole in 1916 and became a housekeeper to John Fitzgerald, a cattle dealer in Western Sydney. And Jessie learnt how to sell cattle of dubious ownership. She was charged again in March 1918. It was a drawn-out case. Accusations were exchanged. However, this time she was acquitted. And the details are the missing cow, a woman charged with stealing. At Parramatta Police Court in February, Jessie McIntyre, a young woman, was committed for trial on the charge of having at Marylands on the 4th of January stolen a black cow, the property of John Fitzgerald. Constable Walsh gave evidence that when he saw the accused, she declined to answer a question as to whether she was at Richmond during the first week of January, that she was required at Parramatta for identification, as she answered the description of a woman suspecting of stealing a cow. She made no reply. The accused had stated that she had not known a man, John Fitzgerald of Granville. She knew nothing of a black cow, cattle and horses. He escorted the accused to the Central Railway Station, Sydney, where there she said, "Are you a Parramatta or a Sydney constable?" He said, "I come from St Mary's," and she said, "You must know me." He said, "Yes, I have known you as Jessie McIntyre." She said, "Yes, you know when I went at Kemps Creek. I went straight. I've done nothing wrong here." He said, "As far as I know you did." Accused said, "There is more between Jack Fitz and I than is worth coming out. I lived on and off with him for 18 months as his housekeeper. He paid me well, he treated me well, until the last. Some person told him yarns. He kicked up a row and threatened to cut me down with an axe. He hit me. I gave him a go for it and gave him as much as he gave me." Accused said, "Does Jack Fitz say I stole his cow?" And the constable said no. And she said, "Well, who does?" And he said, "I have made inquiries and located a cow which Fitzgerald claims as his property." And she said, "I swapped my black cow for the cow that he's claiming." He said, "Where did the swap take place?" And the accused replied, "At Fitz's house." She said that she had no receipt. That was the bad part for her. The accused said that the cow she received in the swap was the black cow Fitzgerald now claimed, that the beast she sold to Frank McMahon at Currajong for £10, and told her that Fitz had been hunting for his cow and had offered a £2 reward for it. The accused stated that she purchased a red heifer for £2. It was worth a tenner now, and Fitzgerald could have that instead of the black cow. The accused said, "See Fitz and tell him it will do no good to put me in jail. They will lose all, and you know what it means to me." She said, "Don't charge me yet. See Fitzgerald and get him to square the matter up." We then went to Marylands Police Station, then charged her. She replied, "That is the end of it now. Once it gets into the books, there's no chance of squaring it up. It will mean the act for me this time." 2 years ago, the accused was living at Kemps Creek. No complaints had been made of her conduct there. Fitzgerald had told the witness that he had no dealings with the accused. Fitzgerald had never made any charge against McIntyre. Richmond Benjamin Ridge, a dairy farmer at Richmond, stated that he saw the accused sometime in January at his place with a brown cow. She wanted the witness to buy the cow, but he refused. The cow was left there that night and the accused took it away in the morning. Though he was always open to buy a good cow if cheap, he turned this deal down because he was suspicious about it. Francis McMahon, an orchardist residing at Comleroy Road, said the accused came to his place in January and said, "I have taken that cow out of your paddock," referring to the one she had grazing on his land for about 6 months, "and I have brought another one back and I want to sell it." She said that she had put the cow in the paddock, which was about 3 miles from his homestead. He inspected the animal and purchased it for £10, and the accused asked for £12 at first. The accused gave him the receipt produced. Some days later, he took some cows, including the black cow, to a cattle sale at St Mary's and saw the black cow sold. Next saw the cow about a fortnight later at Marylands. The horns had been tipped in the meantime and the cow had been branded number 3. The cow had also calved. Sarah Kennedy, a married woman residing at Guildford, deposed that the accused had been staying at her place last year. She saw her on the 1st of January at her place at Guildford, and she said, "I'm going out to Fitz's paddock to get a cow." She returned a few weeks later and said Fitz will find his cow with its throat cut. She said that she had all Fitz's receipts. Daniel Bouffier gave evidence that he bought the cow at St Mary's after branding it with a number 3, offered her at a Sydney market. Fitzgerald claimed the cow and took her. Agnes Jane Ryrie deposed that she had bought the cow for £16 from Fitzgerald. She had not yet paid for the cow but considered it a deal. John Fitzgerald, a cattle dealer of Granville, stated that he lost a black Jersey cow 2 months ago from a fenced paddock at Maryland's. The black cow outside the court was the same. After missing the cow, he claimed and took possession of her there from Mr. Bouffier. There are several cows like this one. I had dealings with the accused pretty well for 2 years, and the dealings resulted satisfactorily. I knew that she owned a cow herself. The accused offered the witness a cow in December. Arranged with the accused to swap a cow for another. I made a swap. It did not refer to the subject cow. At times in such deals in the country, receipts are not given. Took the accused out and pointed out a cow. They were in a sulky. They did not get out of the sulky. Was satisfied that in taking the cow, accused made a mistake. The Crown prosecutor said, in view of this evidence, the Crown does not wish to proceed further with this case, and by direction the jury brought in the verdict of not guilty. You cannot help but wonder whether this was an elaborate ruse to try and lift the price of that cow. And I'm sure Jessie would have made it very clear to John Fitzgerald that if he went ahead in the court and blamed this on her and found her guilty, that she would have a lot to say about his shady dealings as well. But John Fitzgerald certainly got his £16 in the end. Although there is no record that they ever married, Pat Studdy Clift, author of The Lady Bushranger, The Life of Elizabeth Jessie Hickman, says that Jessie called John Fitzgerald her husband and that he was an unscrupulous character. It is said in some accounts that John Fitzgerald was an alcoholic and treated Jessie badly. He forced Jessie to marry him, apparently, but after a few years of domestic violence, she is said to have killed him in 1920 in self-defence with a wooden chair leg and fled to the remote Nullo Mountain area. That story is still disputed, as there's no collaborating death certificate that has been found of John Fitzgerald. However, after she moved up to Nullo Mountain, she told her neighbour there that the reason for coming to the mountain was that she had to kill her husband in self-defence. In February 1919, there was an article titled "Nearly Killed Me Dead, Jessie, John and the Battle Axe." Jessie McIntyre on bail, a resident of Crossroads near Liverpool, was charged at the local court with unlawfully assaulting John Ahern at Preston's on January the 19th. Constable Hall of Liverpool stated that he had arrested the accused at the Liverpool railway station on January the 19th by warrant. She said, "I thought he would have summoned me. I had to defend myself as he came to my house and got to me." He brought her to the police station, and she said, "It's not what I've been doing to Ahern, it's what he's been doing to me." She had been in the district 9 months and had heard about Ahern healing cattle. John Ahern, big man with a bigger brogue, said he was a labourer and residing at Crossroads near Liverpool. On the 6th of January, he saw the defendant about 7 p.m. on an open paddock at the Crossroads. The woman rushed him and they came into halts. She was waving a tomahawk over her head and said to witness, "You rotten old bee." Got off his horse and got a hold of a bit of a brambles stick, and she then said, "I put your horses off the place, I'll put you off too." She threatened him with a tomahawk, which she threw at him and missed. Then she made a rush at him, ducked down, put her head between his legs and caught him by the legs and turned him over. She caught him in a tender place and badly hurt him. Ahern in the struggle kept saying that he would not be able to camp with his wife after she had done with him, and also made an unprintable remark. Before that, she hit the witness on the arm with a tomahawk, which was bruised for some weeks. Before assaulting witness, she threatened to cripple all his horses and followed him for over 100 yards with the tomahawk. Mr. Kemp had never been convicted for assault, have never sold dogs onto the defendant's horse, lived there for 40 years in Liverpool, did not owe a penny, denied treating other people's stock cruelly. Mr. Fitzharding asked witness to restrain himself and to not make impertinent replies. The witness said, "I don't understand you." to Mr. Kemp. When the woman rushed him, she came from Box Road. The property where the assault took place belonged to Mrs. Graham. It was not McIntyre's property. Mr. Kemp said, "You mean to tell me an infuriated woman with a battle axe followed you all over the place?" So she did, said the witness. "A woman chases you, you stop your horse, pick up a stick to defend yourself, and then try to give the woman a good hammering?" The witness said, "She threw the tomahawk at me. It struck me on the arm. I had to keep her off with a stick." "Did you poke her with the stick?" The witness said, "No, I did not." Mr. Kemp said, "She hit you with the battle axe." The witness said, "She came at me in a fighting attitude and had me down before I knew where I was. She got me by the throat and another place. I struggled to get away, but she tried all she could to throttle me, and I can feel it yet. She swung the battle axe, then sidestepped and swung it again. I am in fear of this woman, have complained to the police on 2 other occasions. I have never struck the woman over the head with a stick." The accused declined to give evidence but made a statement. She said that she saw Ahern driving her cattle and he called out that he would give her cattle something for trespassing on his land. Ahern picked up a stick and struck her on the back of the neck, knocked her down and stood over her, and she had to defend herself. He got her and she didn't know whether she struck him or not. She had a complaint to the police about Ahern ill-treating her cattle. The bench after a time and said that they decided not to convict and discharged McIntyre. Only 1 month later, in March 1919, the title of the article says Jessie's Drive. Jessie McIntyre was charged with negligently driving a vehicle in Moore Street, Liverpool. Constable Morrissey stated that the defendant drove sharply round the post office, colliding with a child on a bicycle and narrowly escaping a serious accident. He mounted the bicycle and went after the defendant, who did not stop when called upon. The defendant said she did her best to pull up her horse and she did not hear the constable whistle or call to her. She was fined 20 shillings and 6 shillings costs in default, 7 months jail. This has all happened while Ben Hickman has been to war and has just returned. And now she reunites with and marries Ben Hickman in Richmond, New South Wales on the 11th of December 1920. Apparently without any commitment to be with him, as she fled to the sleepy town of Kandos near modern-day Wollemi National Park. It's possible Jessie wanted a new name and a fresh start, hoping to leave the past crimes behind her in Sydney. While in the circus troupe, she would travel into the bush with an Indigenous performer who had shown her Aboriginal trails, which were pivotal in her escape. She lived alone in a small secluded cave hollow above the headwaters of the Emu and Turo Creeks in Wollemi National Park. She knew every inch of the remote and largely inaccessible area, and while in the remote wilderness, Hickman again found herself the focus of authorities when she joined a team with the notorious cattle duffer Andy Black before forming a duffing gang of her own. She established herself as a leader of a gang of cattle thieves whom she called the Young Bucks. She was 6 foot tall, dressed like a man, and she carried a gun as she ran her own gang. She drew on her formidable horse riding and bush survival skills. They would steal cattle from local farmers, graze them and water them near the hideout, and then take them to the cattle markets at Singleton or Muswellbrook. The gang's predations on the cattle farmers of Moree earned Jessie the nickname the Lady Bushranger. The police set a trap for Jessie of about 6 stock that were clearly identifiable, but she was able to make an escape from them, and it was infuriating them. After numerous escape artist escapades, of one of which resulted in Hickman stabbing the foot of a policeman with a pitchfork. At Dun Swamp, south of Nullo Mountain, she once escaped capture by plunging her horse over a 10-metre cliff into the river below. Her legendary exploits included escaping from custody while in a locked toilet aboard a moving train. On the 19th of May 1923, Jessie features in an article again, and the title is Gross Cruelty. Jessie Hickman of Hoxton Park was proceeded against at the Liverpool Police Court on Thursday the 19th of May for cruelly ill-treating a cow. Constable Hall on April the 20th said he saw a yellow cow at Peter Castle's. One horn was torn off level with its head and hanging by a piece of skin. The hind legs were very swollen as if bitten by a dog, and the cow appeared to be in great pain. He questioned Mrs. Hickman regarding the cow, and she said she did not beat it. She only opened the gate and it ran down the back. Witness had a look around the yard and saw the ground all dug up and blood on a rail. On investigating, he found leaves under the soil with blood on them. John Alex Munro, a schoolboy, said he saw Mrs. Hickman hit the cow with a rail 6 or 7 feet long. The cow ran through a fence and a dog caught it by the heels and it fell over. Mrs. Hickman hit the cow in the head with bricks and kicked it till it got up. She afterwards hit it with some corrugated iron. Jessie Hickman, a married woman, denied beating the cow and said that when she opened the gate, the cow ran down a lane and charged her, and whilst stooping she fell over a bird cage and the cow hit its head against the wall and fell over. She did not know that the cow's horn was broken. The defendant was fined £3 with costs or 1 month's hard labour. Eventually she bought a small farm at Emu Creek. However, on the 24th of October 1926, she was caught stealing some cattle. So it says that Goolgong Elizabeth Hickman, wanted on warrant, charged with stealing 5 cows and a calf, the property of James Frederick Mills. It is said to be identical with the prisoner tried Jessie McIntyre, alias Mrs. Bell, alias Mrs. Hudson, alias G. Murray. Arrest desired and other charges pending. So we are now at the point where Jessie's resorted to aliases in order to be tried in different areas of the state, and it's worked so far fairly well for her, but it's now piling up against her. So nearly 18 months later, on the 16th of May 1928, Elizabeth Hickman, alias Jessie McIntyre, alias Mrs. Bell, alias Mrs. Hudson, alias G. Murray, charged on warrant for stealing 6 head of cattle, the property of James Frederick Mills, has been arrested by Sergeant Buckley and Constable Smith at Rylstone and Wallar Police. Further charged with stealing 2 cows, the property of Roy Helpin and Alan Doyle Willis, respectively, and committed for trial on the first 2 charges at Mudgee Sessions and discharged on the other. So it actually took 18 months to find her, to get her arrested. Jessie also went by the surname Devine, so that is another alias that she used. The police finally caught up with Jessie early in 1928 at the Rylstone Courthouse. On the 28th of August 1928, she was charged with cattle stealing. Ben paid for her bail. The case hinged on one cow that was easy to identify. Just before the trial, the cow disappeared, and the cow was found dead and burnt in the bush, and it's thought that some of Jessie's cattle duffing mates killed the cow. The cattle were under the watch of an Aboriginal police tracker who Hickman had been on friendly terms with. At one stage, he'd had a bad fall from his horse and Jessie had rescued him. Despite positive identification of the cattle by their owners, Jessie was able to convince the jury that the cattle had strayed into her herd without her knowledge, and she was acquitted. On the 15th of August 1928, in the Police Gazette, Stewart Town, Jessie Glenn Thomas, inquired for, has been traced and taken possession of her car. She is identical with Elizabeth Hickman, alias Jessie McIntyre. So again, we're using another alias. After the court case, Jessie took up residence at her Red Bank property on Emu Creek near Denman in the Upper Hunter, but continued to steal cattle and horses, albeit on a smaller scale. However, fate denied her of a long retirement. Jessie was in poor health and she was becoming more and more erratic. She'd had a horse riding accident where she spent a night unprotected from the weather and got pneumonia, and in September 1936, Jessie fell ill with chronic head pains. She was taken to a hospital in Muswellbrook. Uncertain of the problem, doctors moved her to the Newcastle's mental hospital, where she tragically died of a brain tumour a few days later, aged only 46. The tumour was thought to have been linked to when she fell off a bucking horse in the circus. Her body was not claimed, and Jessie was buried in an unmarked pauper's grave at Sandgate Cemetery, Newcastle, New South Wales. We do know that despite the bureaucratic bungle of her burial, Jessie didn't die a pauper. Her estate held a few £100 worth of assets, land and stock, and in Jessie Hickman's case, crime had paid quite well. In May 1937, there was a probate notice, and it said Elizabeth Jessie Hickman, late of Red Bank, Emu Creek, Kerrabee via Denman, in the state of New South Wales, domestic duties, who died on the 15th of September 1936, interstate. In other words, not leaving a will. Although she was largely forgotten for several decades, she has recently been the subject of several books. Courtney Collins' The Burial, and Hickman's granddaughter Di Moore wrote a book, Out of the Mists, The Hidden History of Elizabeth Jessie Hickman. And Mrs. Moore said in an interview in 2014, Jessie was a great storyteller and was never inhibited by a need to adhere to the truth. Tales that people have solemnly assured me were told to them by Jessie have proved to be, at best, a much distorted version of some event, and at worst, a total fabrication in order to play a joke on some poor friend. Jessie could lie with the best of them. Jessie Hickman will go down in Australian history as only one of 3 female outlaws that had a title of bushranger. If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes